Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the best aquarium podcast on planet Earth. And today's episode is even better because we have the easier to look at Adams with me today. I love Jason. I would do anything for him, but all of our viewers are going to have an easier time looking at you than they would him. We all know that, just like when Lisa comes on here, it's going to be the same, but the other way around. I am glad to be welcomed by the better half of the Adams family, Joanna Adams, the queen of all aquascaping on YouTube, is here with me today. Joanna, you had a busy day today, and you decided you would take some of that time to talk about aquascaping with me. I appreciate that very much. Welcome to the biggest podcast in the world.
I've heard of this infamous podcast, so it's truly an honor. Thank you.
I'm very glad to have you to talk about something that I'm not very good at.
You've won contests, so sir, I disagree with you.
Okay, but come on, let's be real with each other here. First of all, it was second place. I was very glad to get that, but it was also
it was
an unfair popularity contest, and we all know. Well, because, but thank you. It was still, I enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun to get the award during my talk at Aquashella when Rob brought me my award for that. Anyway, forget about my aquascaping journey. I want to talk about yours. But before we do that, I want to congratulate you on YouTube. The Small Scape has achieved the 50,000 subscriber milestone. Well done.
Thank you. It's a fun number. I do like even numbers. So,
you can have 49,990,000 subscribers. It's just not the same as 50,000. Like 50,000 is such a legit number. That's like, wow, now I'm real. This is a real deal here. I'm legit now. So,
it's like 50K, 50 cent, it's all really cool sounding numbers. Right.
You're officially a member of the Big Boy Club.
Right.
Welcome.
Now I can stop. So I'll see you later.
In the world of aquascaping on YouTube, there's only a couple of channels that could say that they're bigger than yours. What do we got? Green Aqua, George Farmer,
MD.
And how could I forget MD?
They're a little bigger than me. I think they're at least 55,000.
Somewhere around there. It's not much at all. But no, I mean, all three of those are actually absolute bangers. They're all three very talented. We would also probably put Tanner in there, even though he's not exclusively aquariums. We all know he's a genius, and he would be the biggest out of all of them.
Yes.
Aquascaping is something on YouTube that's very popular.
Mm-hmm.
And you are becoming a name that is very well known in the aquascaping world on YouTube, not just on YouTube, but also in the circuit and on the shows and all of that. You're at all of these. And I want to talk with you a little bit about that today, about the competitive side of it. And because I've watched you in these contests and stuff like that. And it's a lot of fun. But before we get into that, I want to talk just about aquascaping in general, because I think this is a topic, even with me, that is very intimidating because I don't know anything. If I'm going to aquascape something, I'm going to basically throw a bunch of stuff in the tank and see what happens. And maybe because I have a lot of followers on YouTube, I'll get second place. Who knows? But I don't have a plan. It's hard for me to have a vision. My wife always I have a vision in my head. I know what I'm going to do. Mm-hmm. But for somebody like me, that doesn't have to be a beginning fish keeper, but somebody that's beginning with aquascaping, what's the first advice you would give to somebody that's considering becoming an aquascaper, and what is aquascaping and all of that? What would your advice be?
Well, first of all, nobody's born like aquascaping, and I think it's even more difficult than gardening. So if a lot of people do start off gardening, which I did. So I transitioned, and then container gardening, landscape gardening. I transitioned to the underwater world after getting pestered by you-know-who. First of all, I had no interest in it whatsoever. And then, I saw a couple of tiny tanks and tiny plants. There you go. That's history. But, the hardest part is you're learning multiple things at once. Not only what's going to look right, what's going to survive, what things you like, what things the fish will they'll mess up your plans. So a lot of things variables that either people will enjoy working through like those issues or they will get frustrated and stop. But now these days the funny thing is that faux plants are making a huge, I don't know if it's a
Yeah.
comeback or what, but they are in force, not only in the aquarium world, but in the terrestrial world too. People decorate with faux plants like crazy. So once you can get over like really just stinking, when you
Like
first
me.
start, you're going to stink. Other people may not think you stink. You're probably going to be your worst critic. So if you can get over that and um, I always think of it as two things if you want to do well. First of all, you can't care. Just don't care. Don't care what you think. Don't care what anybody else thinks, and then you'll kind of be able to like let your creative side do its thing. You're gonna find your own style, and then don't be afraid to fail. I mean, actually plan on failing. I have done that before when I just can't. Like if I had when I was trying to do my 22, it took so long for us to do the loft, where we used to have the studio
Hmm.
when it was becoming my area. And we're going to put up a wall and it's going to be amazing. It has to be really good. And the more you push off a project, the bigger it becomes. And
Of course.
while you're like, you know what? It's just an aquarium. You need to put your fish in there and maybe put some plants in there and just get it done. So just plan on veiling. And once you do that, if you look at those kind of two things, you'll be able to like work through your issues. And you know what? If you really hate it, switch it up.
Nothing's permanent. I mean, you can
Permanent.
easily. That's so true. I give that advice to people because I get a lot of people that reach out to me and they say, "How do I get started on YouTube?" And my advice is start.
Yeah.
Push record and just
Just
start.
push record. Yeah.
You're going to be terrible at
Yeah.
first. I was certainly terrible. I'm still terrible now, but you're going to be terrible, but just do it, because if you're sitting there thinking about it, you're not doing anything. And so the only way you can do this is by doing it and getting better. And with aquascaping, that's kind of my experience. It's like, I'm not going to sit here and act like I'm an artist. I'm not going to act like I have this elaborate vision in my head like you probably do or Lisa does. I'm not saying you act like that. I'm saying you genuinely have that vision in your head. I don't ever have that. I just start putting things together and eventually something happens. And then 6 months later, I tear it down and do it all over again. But
Hmm.
it's, starting. Just get your hands wet, get in there and
Yeah.
start messing around.
Sometimes I find that my favorite scapes have started by accident. Either I didn't have a plan. Sometimes that can turn out really well. I've had maybe like 30-minute scapes. I've also had multiple day scapes and ones that just never turned out. And I had a master plan in my head. All right, I'm going to use this piece of driftwood. This is what it's going to look like. You put it in and it just doesn't work out. Piece of driftwood's too big. It's too small. It looks stupid. It's going the wrong way. And then other ones where I'm like, well, I'll just put this in. And then I haven't been recording it. And I was like, oh, I'd prefer to just leave it. But now I got to recreate it. So happy little accidents. Those can happen as well.
As Bob Ross says,
You
there are
got
no
it. The
accidents,
ultimate
only
Bob
happy
Ross.
accidents.
Yeah.
That's right. He is the king. I like so many. I'm not a good aquascaper, and dare I say, please don't take offense to this. I'm not even really interested in becoming an aquascaper. But what I love to do is watch people who are very good at what they do what they do.
Hmm.
So I love being at those aquashellas and standing back and watching you and Lisa. For some reason, I couldn't quite figure out why, they always put the two of you next to each other, and I can stand back and I can watch the two of you do your work and create your masterpieces. I enjoy that more than I do doing it myself.
Mm.
I like watching people who are good at what they do what they do. And so
Okay.
it's fun to watch you. And I have seen you put together some absolute masterpieces. My wife too. Um,
Lisa.
but those masterpieces had to start somewhere.
Hmm.
And I think I know the answer to this, but I'm going to ask you because I know you know the answer to this. If somebody is saying, okay, I've got this 40 breeder, I think, isn't that kind of like a unanimous favorite of aquascapers? Maybe I'm just imagining I've heard that. I don't know. But
Could
I have
be. It's a nice size.
got the good depth and everything to it.
Mhm.
I got this 40 breeder. I just don't know where to get started. Are you going to say, well, I'm not going to ask you what you're going to say. What is the very first thing? They don't know what fish they want yet. They don't know how they want to aquascape it. What is the very first thing? Should you consider fish, hardscape? How do you go about coming up with that, creating that vision in your head?
Well, I think that you said it. You have to start somewhere. So either it's going to be hardscaping, it's going to be what you have. So are you you're either going to work with what you have, what you've always wanted, maybe colors, the fish choice. Like for me, if I didn't have green neons, I mean the best fish in the world, then that would probably be my number one thing. All right, I have to have green neons, and then you go from there. Is there a budget? Especially if you're talking, that's why I like 20 gallons and under. That's why I'm like consumed with the nano world, because you need really less of everything. It's going to be at the start, generally speaking, less expensive and easier to come up with as opposed to needing big giant pieces of driftwood or something. But that's if you can get past that, you need to pick something. You're not going to figure out the entire scape immediately. It's like cleaning the house. It's like going grocery shopping. Are you going to go in 5 minutes later, come out? No, you have to go through all the aisles. Or you have to if you're cleaning the house, you have to start somewhere. Start in the bathroom, start in the kitchen. Start somewhere where you say, you know what, this is what I want, and then you work from there. And then just write down ideas. That's the other thing. Just don't if you really can't decide, and I'm really good with that because Jason is a very fast decision maker. I am not.
Mm,
I can take days, months, years to make a decision. He'll make a decision, go with it. If it works, fine. Then he'll switch gears.
me too.
So you can this is another way if you really I don't know where to start, I don't know what to decide. Write down a whole bunch of ideas. Don't try and figure out what your scape is. Just write down a whole bunch of ideas what you want. You like dragonstone scapes with no plants, or you like this fish. You like the other thing you can think of is if you're looking at scapes, look at aquashella videos, go to aquashellas, go to Pinterest, Instagram, find out things, scapes that you like. See if there's anything in common. You're probably going to like multiple different style scapes. Pick one. Pick one. See why do you like it. If you squint your eyes, this is one thing you can do, or take off your glasses like me, squint your eyes or make things blurry. What do you see? Is there a lot of green? Is there a lot of a certain color? Does it make a shape like a bridge shape or a tree? A tree shape is really kind of cool. A woodland scape. There's certain things that it will probably pop out to you, and just pick one.
Here, so okay, I love that, but here's, dare I say, my problem with that. I have been involved very much in the home renovation space on YouTube lately because I'm currently renovating my home.
Okay.
And it's very easy to go on YouTube, and I look at this from the aspect of the beginner. You and I talked about it before we started. Everything I do, I always look at it from the aspect of the beginner. And while I'm watching these videos about these big home renovations or large woodworking projects, and I look at it from the beginner, I look at it and say, well, most beginners, there's no way they're ever going to do that. And so if they see that and there's no way, they look at it as, I can't possibly do that, I wouldn't want them to give up and walk away. A great example would be, all due respect to you and everybody else that I know that's in the aquascaping world, I don't know anyone that can create what Jeff Miyake creates. I mean, and so if I'm a big Jeff Miyake fan, which I am, and I look on Instagram and I see his stuff, I'm going to be like, well, I'll never be able to do that. So are you saying find the one aspect of the project that you like and stands out to you and start with that? Is that okay? See,
And I'm glad you brought up Jeff, because he's actually the one who said if you put a rock, if you put something in an aquarium, you're an aquascaper. And did he start off scaping like that? No.
Mm-mm.
His very first scape looked like the one that we saw a couple years ago. No. So and that's why a lot of people can just decide to give up. If you are a perfectionist, If you are a not good enough sort of person, then yeah, but then again, you can watch remodeling videos. You can watch Joanna Gaines, remodel a house. Or, well, I don't have that much money. I can't remodel a house and put on a barn and put on a second floor. Okay, but is there something you can do? Can you paint your front door? Or you have to work with what you have, and uh, just and work from there. And you really can't learn until you start doing. So I've looked at some of my first scapes. Awful. I mean, I can look at a scape that I just did a little while ago. Awful. I don't like it. Other people can like it as much as they or don't have to like it unless you like it. So the other thing that I really recommend doing, like really recommend doing, have a dojo or a dry scaping area. Get yourself an old tank, a tray, uh, a tote, fill it with some sand, some cheap sand, and get
I
yourself some
love it.
hardscaping and just play around. Just
Hmm.
see like what they look like. I mean, I had this video that I actually want to redo that I created fake plants out of like painter's tape, wire and painter's tape, just to have. You got yourself some Anubias. It's a little fun craft project. Anubias crypts. Just play with them. See what do you like. You can pretend like, all right, I'm going to do a scape with a bunch of crypts and this piece of driftwood. I'll stick it all together and see if you like it. Maybe you won't like it. You're like, you know what? I thought I really like this style. I don't.
Hmm. I like that, and I love just getting started. You're not going to be Joanna Gaines as soon as you start your home remodeling project. If you're a big fan of basketball, do you not ever go out and play basketball because you'll never be as good as LeBron James? No,
Right?
these are people that are world class. Jeff Miyake is a world class aquascaper. He's won every award, all of the awards. You can't expect to be as good as him day one. Some people may because they have that
Yeah.
gene in them that they're just a natural artist. But more than likely, you're a mere mortal like me that is not good. So you just have to start somewhere, and that's why I do it the way I do it, which is just, well, they'll just start throwing stuff in there and see
Hmm.
what happens. But do you have favorites? Like, okay, I want to ask this differently because this will answer the same question. I would imagine the holy grail for aquascapers is to go to a place like an aquashella or a contest of some type where, yeah, you've got the pressure of it, but you go in and before you is a smorgasbord of all the stuff, and you get a certain time limit or whatever. You can go in there and pick the stuff. I would assume you're picking Hardscape first, but what are you gravitating to? Like, what is your favorite hardscape to start with, or does it depend on the tank?
It depends on the tank, and every aquashella I have not competed. Uh, and there are some that are really good with competing under pressure. I'm probably not the best, but I would like to get better by making, more quicker decisions. Now, I don't know how like the pros do it. If they have, because typically you're talking about the same kinds of aquascaping, hardscaping that's going to be available, certain kind of driftwood, certain kind of rocks. And I know a lot of them will be more comfortable using certain kinds, and they're very good at using these different kinds because they do it all the time. And that's another thing. They spend a lot of time practicing, creating, taking them down, redoing them, where, like you said, normal mortals don't have that kind of time. I wish I had that time. I don't have that time. So I can only practice so much. But if I'm looking at it, I'm going to look at what's available, what's the size tank, what am I comfortable creating, and what can increase my chances of creating something that I like with what's there. So I'm going to pick like a rock that's easy to work with. So for example, river rock can be actually very fun to work with, right? If you have very large driftwood, you put some rocks on the bottom, it can look really, really natural. If you've got a lot of tall plants like Val coming up the back, that can look really, really striking. There are other ones that I find very difficult to work with, like the ones with a lot of like striations. The elephant skin stone can be really cool. I find it a little challenging to work with unless you have visions in your head. Oh, this is how I would stack it so it doesn't look like a pile of rocks. I don't have those visions. So then the other thing is Dragonstone and Cerise stone are very popular choices because they look so cool. But Dragonstone is way easier to smash up and make smaller pieces. So you're kind of always weighing, at least I do that, like what's going to increase my chances of success doing things that are going to look not horrible and maybe even something that I like. The other thing is once you get to a certain level, you're going to have a style. So Melanie Holmes has, after it was fun to see her year after year decide and kind of create her style. She liked the botanical, the black water, very few plants, a lot of driftwood. It's like all driftwood. That's
Mm-hmm.
her thing. That's her style. So she realized at some point, I don't like having a lot of plants. I just really like this black water. That's what she does. So there's always things to kind of think about. And the only if you only focus on, I'm going to try and pick up one thing that I like, or I'm going to pick up one little tip, like when the judges come by, if you want to listen to and see how they, if you're not comfortable creating something yet and you're just soaking up information, what are the things they're telling? Like why did they pick that guy as first and this guy as 10th? What kinds of things? So there are interesting things that I've picked up there too.
The competitive side of it is always very interesting to me. And when we talk about these aquashellas, there's usually multiple competitions. You would have the creator competitions, and then you have the full which you've competed in both, haven't you?
Mhm.
You've done the fluval one before and the creator ones.
Yeah.
Um, those are always fascinating to watch. Like I don't even know how any of y'all come up with your ideas. I mean, it's madness, but I don't know that I could. I mean, I have you pointed out I won second place. I didn't. It was a popularity contest, but I wasn't under any kind of pressure. If you added pressure to it, to me, I would feel like that would take all the creativity, what little creativity
Yeah.
I have, take it and throw it right out the window. Having the ability to just take your time and inspect every single piece. And one of the things I love that you suggested, having the dojo, the little practice area. I've even heard of stores like ADG, and my
Yeah.
buddy Mark wants to set something up like this where they have those in their store where you can
Hmm.
take the pieces off the shelf and experiment right there in the store before you even buy them. I love that idea. It's like a
Yeah.
little little play set for the adults to come in and play on. Great place for inspiration.
For sure. The one of our favorite stores around here is called Zuxai, and they have two dojos right there, and they have the three different size substrates. The sand, and then like smaller pebble and larger pebble, and then they even have the driftwood and the rocks around there, so you can just scape away. And then they even have like sieves that you could pick up the gravels and stuff, put them back in the bin for like the next person. It's absolutely fascinating. And it's really, I mean, that type of place is really fun because they also have couches that you can hang out. Like literally, you can just sit there and hang out. It's just awesome. Now,
So
if they had a
so much
coffee
better.
shop too,
Oh boy, that'd be trouble.
pretty much.
Yeah, that would be fun. My buddy's shop, he wants to set one of those things up, and he has a two-toed sloth in his.
Really?
Yep, and he's got these African squirrels, and it's an amazing store. If you and your husband ever come out to North Carolina, I'll take you up there.
Sweet.
It's the nicest fish store I've ever been to in my life, and you've probably met the owner because he goes to a lot of the aquashellas. But
Hmm.
do you think this is a hard question to figure out how to ask it? Do you think looking at Instagram, YouTube, social media in general is better than going to wherever it is that you're going to get your supplies from, whether that be Lowe's or a fish store or whatever, and just start looking until you see something that inspires you, like you find that piece of driftwood that you can work around, or that piece of dragonstone. Some of the prettiest aquascapes I've ever seen are the foundation is dragonstone. Which way would you find would be? Because for me, I would think being there and actually seeing the stuff, something that might catch my eye and make me form a whole project around it. I feel like that would be better for me. But what's better for you?
Well, that's a really actually a good question. I think people are going to be different. Sometimes what I like to do is maybe scroll around on Pinterest, and I actually don't go on Instagram. My other channel, I'm on there, but I purposely do not go on Instagram, and I have not posted on there because I don't want to see what anybody else is doing, because I don't want it to affect what I'm going to do, and I don't want it to make myself think that I was affected by somebody else, because my aquascaping style, I can almost say that I've never done my style. I've never gotten around to doing my style, which bugs me to all get out. And I basically took myself off Instagram saying, shame on you. Get off
Oh
Instagram
no.
until you do something, like other people are doing all these great things. So to get some sort of an idea, sometimes I'll hop on like Pinterest and see some things that maybe inspire me. Like I really like a woodland scape. I'm really feeling like doing something really cozy. Or I really like Dragonstone. Let me see some ideas. And then I like to get most of my inspiration at the store like Zooksai, because then you're looking at actual pieces and you can play with, and you're like, oh, I was thinking like a flat piece would look really cool, but wow, I would have to get like 50 pounds. That's going to be how much? And then you can, go on to plan B or plan C. So it it can kind of depend, because you may also, like you said, you can get very overwhelmed with looking at these high-end aquascapes and be like, well, what's the point? I
I'll
mean,
never
look,
be able to do that.
yeah. Or if you actually calculate how much these aquascapes actually costed, you'd be like, I can't do that unless you go smaller. Go to a smaller tank, and then maybe you can.
And, shame on me. I may have said this, but I'm 50 years old and I don't have a memory anymore. It's gone.
Welcome to the club.
I, I don't know if I mentioned the name of your channel when I was congratulating you for 50,000
I think you
subscribers. I
did.
hope. Okay, I hope I did. But if I didn't, I'm going to say it again. The Small Scape, she does specialize in the small aquascapes. She is very talented on the big ones too. I mean,
Mhm.
the last one I saw you do, I think, was in Dallas,
Mm,
which was where you and Lisa were right next to each other.
that could
Or
be,
no,
yeah.
I think you had Will Nace between the two of you, but you were right there. And um, both of those, I looked at them and I'm like, I don't even know where they got started, but I don't remember. I'm sure you remember it because it's a legendary scape. It was a scape that Jeff Miyake did that
Hmm.
was at the booth for the
Waza.
Oaza, and it was the Dragonstone, and he had the big arch in it.
Oh
Do you,
yeah,
do you
with
recall?
the green the green. Oh
There
my
was
gosh,
green all
the
over.
fish.
It was like
No, I
it
mean the
was like
fish. Oh
oh
wait,
okay.
I'm trying to think that the fish that he put in with that. But yeah, I know the one you're talking about. Yeah.
He had a lot of like I think it might have been Monte Carlo or pearlweed or something
Mhm.
on there. It was the most amazing aquascape I've ever seen, and I'm looking at that and I'm thinking the genius it takes, and you're going to correct me here, but I know how this worked. The genius it takes to put that together in a day.
Mhm.
And I talked to Jeff about it, and I'm like, Jeff, I can't believe you did that in a day. And he was like, John, what are you talking about? I was like, well, you came here and you set up and you put this together. He's like, I've been working on that for months at
Yeah.
home. And I've
Yeah.
been putting all of that together and I delivered it here in pieces. This wasn't for a contest. You wouldn't be allowed to do that for the contest. This was just a display for the booth. Um, and that's the kind of scape I would look at and say, well, I'll never do that. So I might as well never even start. And I've said that to Jeff. And just like you, he said, well, then you're making a mistake because all you got to do is put something in there and, you'll get inspired and it'll work. And Jen Williams put one together that weekend too, which was breathtaking. All of those people, all of
Yeah.
y'all, I don't know how you do it because you are artists and I am not. And that brings me to the only other question I actually had written down was, do you need to be an artist to do this kind of thing? Or can you just throw a bunch of plants in there and call it an art project?
My thought is, if you are going to attempt to do something like this and make it look pretty, make it look cool, you are an artist. Whether you like it or not, you
Okay.
are.
I like that. That makes a lot of sense. That's
Hmm.
yeah, you might not consider yourself an artist, but you just built an art piece. So
Yeah.
guess what? You're an artist.
Hmm.
I
And
like it.
professional artists, I mean, even if you're talking about people who go to art school or people, sculptors, painters, they always say, well, like how I was watching something came up on my feed somewhere, and they said, well, you want to get better at sketching or drawing, whatever. How often, like, how long, like, how many hours per day do you sketch? Oh, I don't know, whenever I can. Well, then you're not going to get any better
How are you going to get
because
better at your
you
craft?
literally have to practice. Imagine that. With really anything, you have to practice, practice, practice. It's and that's what's really hard about like the social media world, because you can see a transformation in like mere minutes. Like, oh,
Right.
they start from nothing to it's done, and it's just very. It's kind of, it can be a little frustrating because that's just not how real world works. So I do like the channels that bring in, like, oh, just so you know, I tried this, that didn't work, so then the glue came off, I gotta do that again, to actually show, yeah, we fail. Or
Right.
there's a whole bunch of things you're not going to see because it didn't work out.
Yeah, I mean, a content creator is going to show you what the content creator wants you to see.
Yeah.
And, some of them, the reputable ones, will tell you when they fail. And I mean, all of the ones that I follow would certainly admit to that. I actually had Jeff Miyake on this podcast prior to Jason joining me. And he had said, do you know how many scapes I've done that I'd never showed to anyone because they just, they just didn't work for whatever
Right.
reason.
Hmm.
And speaking of never working, this is something that I asked Jeff in that podcast. What everybody talks about is, I don't want to do an aquascape like that because I'm not interested in doing all of the maintenance to keep it looking like that. And how much truth is there to that? Because like for Jeff, he's putting something together to create a buzz and maybe win a contest, which he does all the time, or a display that's going to probably be taken down or whatever. But so the maintenance really isn't an issue for him, not in all of his stuff, I mean. But what is your response to that? Is, I don't want to do that because it's too much work after the scape is done.
Well, you have to keep that in mind. Now, when they're doing those, like the competition tanks that they're setting up, in the matter of a day, I don't know how much thought they put into, like, can somebody maintain this, or can they themselves maintain it, or would they care to maintain it? Not really quite sure if they're going into the thought process of, am I going to put that plant way up there? Is it planted too deep? Is it not going to get enough light? Is it going to get too much light? I actually don't know, but I do know that a lot of the competitors have taken offense to the fact that people come up and say, "Oh, that's really nice. That's really really cool," but nobody can maintain that, because they're like, yeah, you can, and I do all the time, or I created one like this all the time." But that's something you also need to keep in mind when you're trying to figure out what you want to create yourself. There's lots of scapes that I would love, but I don't want to maintain it. I really don't. If they're going to be a possibility of massive amount of algae, if these are plants that I'm not really comfortable working with, am I going to buy 50 or $100 worth of these plants just to watch it not survive, and then my scape looks horrible? So those are all things that will help you decide what you want to do. But the other thing is, do you really know how a plant's going to do until you keep it? No. And like in the gardening world, they say you got to kill a plant 3 times before
Mm-hmm.
you can probably keep it alive. And you're just going to learn in the process. So either you're going to succeed, you're going to fail, but you're also going to learn. So pick, just pick something.
Well, and on the topic of plants, which is something I like talking about a lot because, well, that's what I do for a living. we've touched on the hardscape. That's kind of the foundation, but then we're going to want to decorate this with plants. I think you and I share similar views on our favorites. Um, at least I know one of your favorites that I agree is an awesome plant. But
Uh-huh.
regardless of all of that, you deal with a lot of smaller tanks. So are you trying to stay with plants that also stay small, or are you using anything you want to use and just trim it back and keep it looking good? Or do you restrict what plants you use because it's a small scale?
I typically do restrict the plants that I'm usually not going to pick a plant that needs a lot of maintenance that's going to get too big, with the exception of Val. I will put Val, and I have put Val into smaller tanks, knowing that I will probably have to move it. Crypts are the same way. At some point in a tiny tank, you got a 3.5 gallon. You put some crypts in there, they're going to get too big. You're going to have to move them. So there are exceptions, but generally speaking, I will try to use. And it depends on the scape too. Maybe after a while, I haven't done a tank where I had to actually move plants. I'll be like, yeah, I really want to use some crypts in there, so I'm going to deal with it. But that's why a lot of my favorites are certain kind of anubias that stay really tiny, or the bucephalandra, where they're stunning plants and they stay really small, and you really don't have to do anything. They just sit
Some
there.
Anubias. Some Anubias.
Some anubias, yes,
I've
not
got
like the
some right now that,
gigantea.
yeah. Now I'm gonna say something that's either gonna embarrass me and make me not look like a good friend to you, or I'm gonna be right and I'm gonna be happy because I'm right. I
Okay.
swear I remember hearing you say, either to me in person or in one of your videos on the Small Scape or on Primetime, I don't know. Did I hear you say that the crypt parva is your favorite plant, or did you say it's your favorite crypt?
It's one of my favorite plants. Very good. It is actually one of my favorites, and it is one of my favorite crypts because it does stay tiny.
It stays very tiny. And that's kind of like with the Anubias. You can say Anubias are small. That's
Some,
actually not true because some of them
no,
are. And crypts, the crypt parva is definitely going to be. I don't think there's a smaller crypt than than the parva. I
no.
mean, none that I've seen anyway. And they're
Mhm.
they're all going to start small, but that one's going to stay small. And I love that. What are your favorites to use? And I mean specific. Don't just
Specific.
say Anubias or crypt. The
I wouldn't.
specific ones. What are your
Specific is
favorites?
ANP, Anubias nana petite. I call it ANP because
A
it's
staple.
probably it's the plant that started me, that reeled me right into the hobby. And the bucephalandra, I like that now they have so many different trade names. I don't even
Mm-hmm.
know. Like, but the Kettigang is a really cool, or the brownie. Wavy green is, I would probably have to say wavy green is my favorite boost, but it looks almost identical to the ANP. So there you go. I do like the Crypt Parvex. It stays super tiny. Crypt Flamingo is very beautiful. I think I only had that once, but you do need like higher light. The Crypt, I also like the Wenty bronze and
Mm-hmm.
red. Beautiful. And then the Corkscrew Val will always be
Okay.
one of my favorite because it's just so whimsical.
Whimsical. I like how you accentuate that. That's fun. Uh, I agree with all of those. As far as Buse goes, Kettigang for me, just
Hmm.
because it's a different color. I mean,
Yeah.
everything's red, and Kettigang is
Hmm.
going to be more of that burgundy red color, which I love. Not an easy plant, even though a lot of places would say it is. I don't. Maybe I'm just a big dummy. I don't know. I don't think it's certainly not as easy as Crypt Parva or Anubias petite for sure. But
Okay.
that's just my experience.
Hmm.
We've brought it in. We've sold it. I've used it. I love it. Um, if somebody comes to me and says, "What's an easy plant to start with?" I'm going to push them towards the Nana Petite before I do the any of the Bucephalandra. But that's just me.
Oh,
I mean,
okay.
do you disagree? Tell me I'm wrong.
It completely depends on your tank, your water parameters, who you got in there, the light that you have. It's so, for me, I don't know. They do equally well, and I've had a number of different boosters that have done very well with nothing in the tank, no filter, very low light. and they've even like flowered. So I was
Right.
like, really, what are you doing? And I've got like, fancier, quote unquote, fancier setups where they're just like not happy. I don't even know. Um, the one that I have that I really, really like is that I don't currently have, but I think I'm going to be getting in here is the microsword. Have you ever dealt with microsword?
I have plenty of it as we speak. Yes.
Do you really?
If
Yeah.
we're talking about the Liliopsis brasiliensis, if we're going to
Yes, that's
use,
the one.
I just impressed you, didn't I?
Mr. Fancy Pants name. Yes.
I don't like
Wow.
using scientific names, but yeah, I love
Yeah.
that one. That one's great.
Yeah.
Um, Particularly, no disrespect to any other farms, but the Tropica microsword, I absolutely love that one. I mean, it's the easiest thing in the world. And I'm glad you brought that one up because I was going to ask you, one of the things that you see quite regularly with these fancy aquascapes is the ground covers.
Yeah.
Crypt parva, it might take you 3 years to cover an entire, but what are you using? What is your favorite? Is it the microsword that you're using for ground covers or Monte Carlo or what are we using?
That would be the only one that I would use. My light is not, I never really use high enough light for it to really take off. And I never use CO2 at this point. So I have never been successful with pearlweed, Monte Carlo, any dwarf hairgrass hates me. So you know what?
It
Right
hates
now I
me
hate
too.
it. And I stick with microsword. That's just kind of little. I consider it like a like patchy grass. Like it's just kind of starting out. But I never have a carpet. I just don't. I just know that, and I'm okay with that because most of my scapes I prefer to see the substrate and some rocks and stuff like that.
There is a certain breathtaking nature to seeing a really well done ground cover, or
Sure,
I don't know if you call it ground cover, but
mm,
that is so much work to do that.
it is.
And I mean, I'm not interested. I like looking at it, and there's a
Mm-hmm,
lot of things I like looking at, but I have no interest in having for myself. And
mm-hmm,
all of the aquascaping stuff is that for me. I love looking at it. I'll never do it, not because I'm not capable. I could learn to be capable, but just because I get enough just from watching y'all do it and
right.
and just enjoying what you're doing. I don't have to do that myself, and you know, I don't know. Maybe I just don't have the energy. I'm too old, Joanna. I just can't do it. It's too
You have
much
to
for
pick
me.
your battles.
That's right. But we've talked about these small ground covers. We've talked about your favorite, the petite. I think that's an excellent choice.
It's
But all
adorable.
we've talked about is rhizome um, and rosettes. We haven't talked about stems at all. I mean, are you
No,
not a fan of stem plants? Is that not your
some of
thing?
them. Some of them, like my favorite stem is Bacopa.
Oh, bless you.
I love
Did we
Bacopa.
just become best friends?
Is that your favorite?
It's not my favorite, but I love it
Should
very
be.
much.
It's
Rotala.
awesome. And my favorite thing about it is that when it gets towards the water, or if you even just float it, it boop, pops up and
Straight up.
it'll crawl along the water, it'll crawl along rocks. It's just awesome.
Now, excuse me, when you say Bacopa, are we talking moneywort or are we talking about Caroliniana? Which one do you prefer?
The Caroliniana.
The fat one. You like the fatter one that's going to crawl all over the place and all of that. Okay. I don't, I don't hate that. I
Okay.
honestly don't. I like it
Okay.
a lot. Bacopa Caroliniana is one that's frustrating me right now because
Hmm.
the time of year we're getting them from the farm and they're really small and
Okay.
it's just really bugging me. I like when I order Bacopa and it comes in 12 inches
Oh,
and
that would be
uh,
nice. Yeah.
but the moneywort is one that's for some reason always big and
Happy.
beautiful and easier
Hmm.
to control than Caroliniana. Where are we on Rotala? Because Rotala's my favorite. All the Rotalas are my
I like
favorite.
Rotundifolia. That's my favorite.
Hmm.
I only have like a little bit of it right now. But I do, that was one of the first ones that I ever kept that had just a little bit of red at the top. And I really enjoyed that I had in the back of I had a group of candy cane tetras. So I had Candy Cane Island. And it was
Oh,
kind of
sweet.
along the back with Corkscrew Veil. And then, of course, I had some Bulbitis. Don't get me started with Bulbitis. I
Mm.
love Bulbitis. And I loved it. They all played really nicely together. So that would probably be my favorite. But I like Rotala.
I want to ask you about a couple more plants, and then I want to ask you the big question when it comes to aquascaping, and it's not one that you're expecting.
Oh,
Uh, where are we on bulbs? You mentioned bulbitis, but where are we on things like crinum and apontogetons and all of this? We don't mess with those
Jason loves crinum.
because he's a smart person.
Just say the word crinum and he'll be like, oh, it's all right. They just get too big. They just, I don't, they don't do much for me.
But see, Jason is like me. He's not an aquascaper. So to put a calamostratum in there that's going to get massive and look like a big spider
Oh,
web, it's almost making you feel like you're accomplished. I mean, so that's what it is. And that's why I like Rotala and things like that, because it
mhm,
makes me look like I'm a better plant keeper than I am. Although Rotala can be kind of difficult. But
mhm.
so you're not a bulb person. So not even things like tiger lotuses and stuff like that you're
I
not
do.
into?
I was just going to say that is my favorite,
Okay.
the tiger lotus. Love it. I got that in a plant pack, and I wouldn't have picked it. I got it, and I was like, well, all right. Now I'm in love.
Okay.
In love. Love
I
them.
can't I
It's
can't
got a
blame you
nice
there.
red color. You don't really have to do much. It's half in the substrate, half out. Sign me
I
up.
guess I guess we have to be strategic as to where we put that in the aquascape, though, right? Because those stems are going to come up and they're going to block some of the light and do all of
Hmm.
that.
Hmm.
But yeah, that is a striking. I can't even tell you how many of those we sell. It's out of control. And the
Really?
most frustrating thing that I deal with those, we'll get them in, and the bulb will have a lot of really nice leaves coming out,
Hmm.
and we get the red tiger lotus,
Yep.
and and then the stems will break off during shipment, which we
Hmm.
know is okay. They're
Hmm.
gonna be fine, but the customer will open it up and they're like, "I have the bulb and I have this. It's dead. It doesn't work." And it's like, "No, it will. I'm sorry that happened. That connection between the bulb and the stem is very delicate and it'll pop off, but put it in there. It'll pop back up. I promise."
Hmm.
Me, I love Tiger Lotus, and it might be just because we sell so many of them. Maybe that's why I love them so much. But here's the killer of a question. And this is one that I regret not asking Jeff about, because when I asked him what his favorite plant was, I was so happy to hear him say Rotala. All the Rotalas was his favorite.
Oh, wow.
But here's the thing, you know this, but Rotala rotundifolia, everybody that you buy it from is going to have it immersed.
Hmm.
I mean, they may submerge it for the week that they have it in their tank, but then they're going to ship it to you, and it's probably still going to be in its submerged, or excuse me, its immersed form, which means it looks very different than it's going to look when it comes in and actually converts. Where are you at with that? Do you take that into consideration, or are you going to submerge it and let it do its thing before you put it in the aquascape? Or are you going to put it in when the leaves are still round and don't look at all like it's going to look when it converts?
Well, see, I only deal with so many stem plants, and frequently with a lot of the stem plants that we get in, that we will acquire, however, uh, we'll usually float them for a while. So I can't say that I will immediately plant something in and have it look awesome, because I don't deal with stem plants that much. So I'm not usually dealing with the conversion, at least, waiting for a conversion or something before starting Escape or adding it in. Generally, I float them. I've even gotten the wisteria
Oh boy,
Sprite,
that's
water Sprite or wisteria, I forget which one it is. And I immediately just floated. I mean, for my 22, I just floated. They kind of came apart, and now they actually look really pretty. They look like floating. They look like floating plants. They just look like little sprouts. That's how I like
nice.
to use them.
I like that.
Would other people do it? Probably not. I don't care. I like how it looks.
Again, looking at this from the standpoint of the beginner, I kind of feel bad for not clarifying what it was that I was talking about. Most plant farms, to those who are not plant people, they're going to grow their plants immersed, which basically means particularly stem plants, but even rosettes,
Hmm.
anubias, all of them, they're going to grow them out of the water. So
Hmm.
the root ball is in the water, and usually in rock wool, and then the plant itself is out of the water. It has unlimited access to CO2. It grows faster and bigger. Some plants, like Rotala, wisteria is another big example of this, in its immersed form looks very different than it's going to look once you submerge it. And it takes quite some time to convert over into its submerged form, which is why I always say people who sell plants, nobody sells submerged plants. They're all immersed because they're only submerging them for a week before they ship them out to somebody. And so anyway, that's a whole other argument. We're not here to talk about that, but that's what we're talking about when we talk about them converting. Not all plants do it. Crypts don't do it. Anubias doesn't do it. It's going to look the same in its submerged form as it does immersed. I just wanted to clarify that. Sorry. I'm certainly not presenting this as if you didn't know, Joanna. I'm just saying my viewers might not know what I was talking about there, and I like to be very clear on that. So, but
Very
wisteria is probably the biggest shocker for people, because when they get it from, sometimes when I get it in, it is in, like, I don't even know why, but it looks fully like wisteria, like very similar to water sprite. But sometimes we get it and it is straight up like this time of year when they're small, still in that immersed form, and people are like, this isn't what I ordered. I'm like,
No, what is this?
give it a little time. I promise it'll switch over, and before you know it, it's going to be that wild and crazy spider web of a plant. But yeah, so I do love stems. I think, do you have a particular like type of plant that's your favorite? Meaning like the rhizomes, rosettes, stems, obviously
If,
not bulbs.
if I had to pick, it would probably be the epiphytes, so the attaching plants, because most of my favorites are those, the bulbitis, the boost, and then the anubias.
Okay.
And you can put them
And
anywhere. You can put them at the bottom of your tank, the top of your tank. You can wedge them. You can super glue them. You can just, there's so many options.
they are so beginner friendly. I mean, probably the epitome of beginner friendly, and they're so easy to keep that it's almost like keeping plastic plants. Maybe not the Buse. Again, I know I'm contradicting myself, but the Anubias in particular. Again, you may disagree and think that Buse is easy. Maybe it's just me then. Maybe I'm the problem here, not you. What about the concept of, because so much of aquascaping is the plants. I mean, it's very rare that you're going to see an aquascape that doesn't have plants. Although when you do see it, there was that one at Aquashella. I don't even think I need to tell you which one, because you probably know, because I think it won the aquascaping contest. It had peacocks in it,
Yeah.
and it was just a bunch of gray stone that I'd never seen before. Unbelievable. That is incredibly rare. Am I wrong to say that it won the contest?
I think it did. If that's the one I'm thinking of, I think it did. But yes,
Yeah.
it's rare to see hardscaping only, rock only. But I, as much as I love aquatic plants, there are a lot of scapes that I've done, even where I'm like, you know what, I'd be perfectly happy with no plants because it just looks really striking. And sometimes your hardscaping is so cool, you know, like you have the coolest piece of driftwood, or you found like really cool rocks, and you're just like, wow, that looks really cool. The was it the ADA in Dallas, that really high end aquarium store? I forget what it's
Hmm.
called.
ADG, isn't
ADG,
it?
yeah, yeah.
ADG, yeah.
Uh, Amazing scapes, rock, driftwood, that's it, and stunning.
I remember being at that Aquashella. That tank was right next to Jeff Miyake, as if we haven't talked about him enough. So, of course, when I went over there, I went straight to Jeff because I know
Hmm.
him and I'm a fan of his. I went and looked at Shelby's, and, you know, I looked at the people that I know, and I looked at that tank next to Jeff's, and I was like, man, that was going to be really, really nice. And he was like, what are you talking about? I said, well, it's unfortunate. It's a beautiful hardscape. It's unfortunate he didn't finish, because I just thought they just didn't get to the point yet where they were going to put the
Right.
plants in. And Jeff was like, no, he's been done with that for a while. That's it. That's done. And I was like, oh, well, I look like a jerk. But it was absolutely gorgeous, but I just didn't realize that it was going to be done. So you don't have to put plants in, but when you do, you're going to have, there's a lot of different levels to these plants, your ground covers, your mediums, your backs. And I use simple terms, front, back, middle. What are your thoughts on that? Do you have to put stems in the back? Do you have to put what's your strategy for laying out plants? Or do you have one?
Well, it all depends. And since I deal with smaller tanks, there's usually only uh, so many options. Some stem plants I won't even mess with because I don't want to, have any of the maintenance. Um, I think after you do so many scapes and you're like, yeah, I don't really care. I'm just going to put it wherever I want. And then, like, after a month or two, and you're like, well, it doesn't look good. I actually don't like that. And you're like, all right, maybe that's why they usually put stem plants in the back. And then you just note that and say, okay, I got it now. There's other ones that I'll just want to put certain places so you can see them. Like booths, I'm going to put towards the front so I can see it. I
Sure.
have put plants like the tiger lotus towards the front because I wanted to observe it. It was the first time keeping it. I wanted it towards the front so I could watch it.
I understand that completely.
You know, yeah.
Makes
So
sense to me.
it all depends. It all depends.
What about my nemesis? And this is my nemesis because it's my fault. Because when it comes to aquascape maintenance, I am a lazy bum. I'll admit that. Moss. Moss is my nemesis because it just goes wild. It almost does too good, and it grows like crazy, and it takes over. Where are you at with mosses? Any kind.
I am trying to use it more in more strategic ways. So, like tying it, getting a clump and tying it or gluing some along some branches. I would like to start using it more. There is some that I have that's going to be in one of my little scapes coming up is called giant willow moss. Are you familiar with it?
I am not.
You might you might like that a little better. It doesn't go all crazy, although you have to watch the light. Some of these tanks I have very low light, so I don't have to worry about going crazy because it's like barely. It's like, hey lady, give me some more light. So I don't have to worry about going anywhere. But it's giant, so the little fronds are bigger than your regular little tiny Java moss or Christmas moss. The little tiny, it's bigger. It's actually quite fascinating, little plant.
I'll have to look into that. Does it
I'm
have
just throwing
a
it out.
scientific name? Because I'm used to
Oh,
hearing
Mr.
like,
Fancy Man. Okay, I don't know. I
well,
call it giant willow moss.
okay. I mean, I look at them on my sheets when I'm ordering, and it's like
Oh,
Taxophyllum
gotcha.
barberi and Taxophyllum Taiwan and all this.
Uh huh.
So, like, even Java moss is not called Java moss. I
No.
call it Java moss, but if I said Java moss to the farm, they'd be like, "Oh, this guy isn't
Ugh,
serious.
right.
Who is this bum?" But I love particularly what people like you with that are aquascapers that they make a piece of driftwood look like a tree by putting moss on top and stuff like that. I love that, and every time I've tried that, it's failed miserably. Not because it just died, but because it did too good and it ends up taking over. And I'm just like, okay, enough is enough. You trim it and it goes all over, and it's just too much for me. But
What one plant like that, and I that's a love hate. It's kind of a think twice plant for me. If you really want to keep this, is same issue, and I'm going to say it wrong, but I know I'm saying it wrong because I don't have. I can attempt to say it the correct way, but you know what? I don't do it well enough, so I'm not going to. Subwastertang.
okay,
Okay,
that's the same way I would say it. So hey, we're
right?
we're
Oh
together
yeah,
there.
it's funny too. And when I did a video on it, I said this is how you pronounce it. I'm not going to say it well enough, but this is how I say it. And I would still get comments. You said it wrong. This is how you say it. And I'm like, yeah, I know. I've taken 4 years of German back 150 years ago in school. But until you've heard Sandra Bullock, have you ever heard Sandra Bullock speak German?
I have not.
You should look it up. It's extremely impressive.
Okay.
So until I can say it like that, I ain't saying it. So it's a plant. We had it in one of the studio tanks when we had the four tanks, the 8.5s lined up behind it, and I
I
had it
sat in
in
front of
one,
those.
and
I
it
know.
just overtook. And then as it overtook, algae moved in, and it was a bunch of subwater tank mixed in with algae. It was a hot mess. Of course, we added a mono shrimp, and those guys are amazing. Cleaned it up, but then I just got so mad. I ripped out a whole bunch of it. I was going to take it out. And then it's just settled in, and it looks amazing in the one tank I have it in. It's just a big chunk of driftwood with like a little skinny piece of driftwood and some like just meandering around, and it's beautiful. We're okay with each other right now.
You're getting along now. Okay.
We're getting along at the moment.
Speaking of plants not getting along with, where are we with floating plants? More particularly, things like azolla, red root floaters, things like that, Sylvania. We're not going to talk about duckweed. We're not going to talk about
Okay.
that right
We
now.
don't need to talk about it.
We can let that go. I mean, so you either love it or hate it, whatever. But the real ones,
The
the
real,
ones
yeah.
that we actually have to buy, not the ones that infiltrate our tank by accident.
Red root floaters don't like me. I've tried it a number of times. They don't like me, so I don't like it. I love the Salvinia minima.
Hmm.
And frogbit can be really fun, especially if you're keeping that in mind when you're doing your aquascape, because the roots get so long, which are really cool. But if you've got all your other plants, they're going to get tangled, and you're going to that looks like a mess. So that's just something to keep in mind. And the what's the other one that I like? I did try the Riccia flutens. Are you familiar with that? I did
Mm-mm.
float that. That became a hot mess. I don't. A lot of people will tie that down. I'll never touch that one again. But and I do actually have some salvinia in one of my tanks, and it's dying. It's just
Oh,
like, we're not sticking around. I'm like, what are you doing? I have no idea. Other tanks, it'll just be you're just gonna be pulling like chunks of it out.
mm-hmm.
So it depends. I can't say that I love them or hate them. I think they can look really cool, especially since I do adore a pond style scape. Little ones, big ones. I love looking down into tank, and what's more fun than little tiny lily pads? So how I look
It's
at them,
true.
you know.
It's true. I would have. I mean, I just thought of that on the top of my head to ask you about that because I've never really seen people incorporate floating plants into elaborate aquascapes. Just because I feel like it would take away some of the lighting and the scape
Hmm.
wouldn't look as good and stuff like that. But I figured, we're talking plants here and aquascaping. I figured I would ask you about it, and that pretty much exhausts all of my plant questions for you. I mean, and aquascaping questions, unless you know of something that we haven't discussed that somebody who's scared of aquascaping like me needs to know. What do they need to know that they don't know now? Is there something we haven't covered?
I don't think so. Oh, substrate. People
We
get really scared about, and it seems very illogical when you first start. You're like, wait, I could put plants into sand? That can't be. That can't be. Oh, yeah, it can be. You just, fertilize it with the like root tabs into the substrate, like magic. Your sand becomes magical substrate. So it's not like planting in the garden where you need soil. That's another thing that I think people can get very overwhelmed with or confused by. It's like, well, what should I use? Should I use gravel? Should I use sand? Should I use the aqua soil? That's just something that you have to watch some videos on, see how they do it, see if you want to do it, and research what do you want to deal with. Really, that's just something that you're going to pick up over time. Like if you get a really fine sand, it's going to be really hard to gravel back. If it's really light colored, it's going to look dirty really quick. Uh, if you use gravel, it can trap a bunch of stuff. But some plants are easier to plant in it. The soil, like the aqua soils, they're very fluffy and buoyant. So planting in that, I'm not a big fan.
They just come right
Uh,
up.
it'll yes, it will. So that's another thing that I think there's a lot more options. I wish it was simpler to start somebody off as a beginner, because when you're a beginner, you just want somebody to tell you, what should I do? That's what makes kind of frustrating, because you're like, oh, you can do this and this. They don't want to hear those options. So if it were me starting off, just get some sand, pick any kind of sand you want, and get root tabs. Put them in the
Hmm.
substrate. There you go. See how you like it. There you go.
And I've had just as good of results using that with the root tabs as I would using the expensive planted soil that,
Mhm.
like you said, you take your tweezers and you put the plants down in there. And when you pull your tweezers up, it just comes right up
Ah,
with it. There's nothing more frustrating than that
oh,
to
the
me. And
worst.
sand, it's not as bad. It'll still do that. It can. But if you go deep enough, sand is going to do a better job of holding it down. Put those root tabs in there. You're getting the same nutrition that you would from that soil. So
Yeah.
that's great. I mean, I was going to bring up Wallstead, but I don't even, that's not even really aquascaping. It's more natural planted
Natural.
aquarium. So love it. I've had her in this room.
I
Diana
know. That's
Wallstead,
so cool.
she is a legend. I've got tanks over there that I had nothing to do with, that Lisa put together with her, that are doing magnificent, but that's not really aquascaping. That's just planted tanks. We've been debating, should we try to get Diana back here and bring her on the podcast? I just don't know if she would do it, or maybe our live stream or something like that. Diana's very, very shy. She doesn't really want to do that. So she's like, if you want to know what I would say, read the book.
How funny.
But anyway, this has been a lot of fun. I came into this knowing, because I've known you for a long time, we've had so many conversations. I knew I didn't need to have a plan. I knew that the conversation would just roll out, and it would be like Jason and I do. We don't really have a plan. We just pick a topic and we roll with it. And you, like the pro you are, you hung in there and did a wonderful job.
Still here.
I appreciate your expertise so much. Do something for me now that nobody ever wants to do. Promote yourself. Talk about your multiple channels that you have. We don't need to mention Primetime. Jason and I do that enough, but promote.
We don't talk about him.
Yeah, who cares? Promote Joanna Adams. Tell us where everybody can find you and all that, because obviously a lot of them have already, but for those that don't know, where can they find your stuff?
All right. Well, my aquarium channel is the Small Scape, and I am on I'm not on everything. I'm not on Facebook. I'm one of the only people who has never. I don't even know what it looks like.
Good for you.
But I know. Thank you very much. Find me on YouTube. At some point, I will go back into the mysterious world of Instagram. At some point, when I create a scape that I feel is worthy. But I'm obsessed with nano tanks, everything smaller. I've always loved miniatures. So small tanks, 20 gallons and under, are like my jam. And once I kind of wanted to do between the 50 and the over 50K subs, I wanted to start doing, especially since I've got my, I keep changing the name. It used to be a loft. I usually call it the loft, a workshop, what did we settle on? Like a lounge. It's kind of like a lounge. It's like a relaxing place. I'd like to start doing some of the scapes that I've had in my head since I started the channel. I said, I'm going to start my own channel so I can do this particular scape. They're a little out there, a little more theme oriented. But yeah, so if you like kind of like info on, and I definitely do cater to beginners. I don't consider myself a pro. I never will. I'm not really a high-end aquascaper. I don't care to really, I prefer to be a rebel. A rogue small scaper. That's me.
Well, you don't give yourself enough credit. I'm always blown away when I see what you do. Everything that I've seen you do. I've been in your home. I've seen I haven't seen the tanks that are behind you because they weren't there at the time, but I've seen all of your small tanks. You had your little nano area, which I thought was amazing. And you don't give yourself enough credit. You're very good at what you do.
Thanks,
and you
John.
make all of those big time scapers nervous every time you come in, because they're like, we thought this was going to be easy, but
I can tell. They're scared. They're shaking. That's all right. Keep them scared.
I mean, hey, I've seen you put some absolutely breathtaking stuff together. So good for you. Her channel is awesome. Her personality is amazing. It's very easy to learn from and easy to listen to and easier to look at than her husband. We've already established that. So thank you again so much for doing this. We got another guest coming up, somebody that you know pretty well.
Really?
And your husband is going to be interviewing that guest. So it's going to be fun. And she actually just pulled up in the driveway. Oops, did I spoil who it is?
What? I think I know her.
We were thinking about having it be you and her at the same time, and Jason and I not even be involved, but
someday.
Lisa, yeah.
It'll be a long one.
It'll be fun. But I hope to see you someday this year at one of these shows or something like that.
Yeah.
That would be fun. Thank you so much for spending time with me here today. And hey, that's it. Thank you, everybody, for watching. And like Jason says, we will see you same time, same place next week. Thank you much. Thank you again, Joanna.
Thanks, John.